Thanks everyone for having me, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Savanka, and thank you, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, for this honor and for your leadership. Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is such a pleasure to be here to celebrate the free press and humanitarians all over the world. And thank you to the UN Correspondents Association for this recognition, which I accept in honor of the over 120 million people who have been forced to flee their homes. Refugees that I have met, like Grace from South Sudan and Hantam from Mali, who live in exile but still work for the benefit of others. I also accept it on behalf of the UNHCR personnel working tirelessly to protect forcibly displaced people all over the world. And of course, congratulations to those journalists who have been honored this evening for your courage and commitment to holding power to account and your vital role in bringing factual information to people during an age of mis- and disinformation. Please continue your work in helping to shine a light on the human impact of these forgotten crises. So thank you. The world is, as we know, in a state of great volatility, and the next few decades may well define the path of our planet and of humanity. Despite this, we must remind ourselves that it is not only governments which shape the course of history, but our children and our children's children who will decide the course of the future. In successive generations and in the power of the people, we find hope. I know from my own family's personal history that anyone can become a refugee at any time. During the Second World War, my grandfather, Nicholas Tapticus, was training as a doctor in Greece when the Nazis invaded Athens. As troops pushed through the mainland and swathes of the country fell under occupation, he was left with few options but to escape. Embarking on a journey that many thousands of refugees have since made, but in the opposite direction, he boarded a tiny boat and crossed the Aegean Sea to Turkey. From there, he traveled across land and finally found safety in Damascus. In this momentous week for Syria, my thoughts are with its people, and I'm hoping, alongside everyone here, right, as you agree with me, for lasting peace in Syria, we hope. At the end of the war, as German troops withdrew from Greece, my grandfather made his way back to Europe, and in April 1945 he joined one of the first humanitarian agencies established by the newly formed United Nations, the UN Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, which could be said is the first incarnation of the UNHCR. Now, yes, the UN Relief and Rehabilitation Administration came to an end in 1948, as we know, but the enormous task of helping over 40 million Europeans who had been uprooted by war to find their way back home had only just begun. And that is how the UNHCR was formed in 1950 with a simply 3-year mandate to finish the job. And as we all know, history didn't quite work like that. 80 years after the peace was declared in Europe, the work of the UN continues as war still plays out, as you all know, in Ukraine, Lebanon, Gaza, Sudan, DRC, and elsewhere. But the most vulnerable continue to pay the costliest price. The Second World War, however, did allow for moral consensus of the Geneva Conventions and the UN Charter, which opens with the words, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war." The values of the UN Charter continue to be relevant today. Peace, justice, human rights, and equality. And although much has changed since 1945, the UN still remains the only organization where the world's nations can gather together to discuss global problems like forced displacement, like climate change, and find shared solutions. As we know, thank you, that one person. As we know, in a deeply As we know, in a deeply polarized world, there can be a rapacious hunger to criticize organizations like the UN, but from its inception, In simplest terms, it has been an organization set up to help those in deepest need, an organization designed to represent the very best of human confluence. It is imperative that the UN continues to do its work for successive generations and, quite frankly, for the good of humanity. Unlike my grandfather, I don't have the skills to provide medical help to people in need, but as a Goodwill ambassador, I will keep making the moral case for asylum and for the UNHCR to encourage public support and funding to ensure meaningful solutions and protection for displaced people. So finally, that is why I hope to inspire solidarity in the next generation to think less about us and them and more about we, the peoples. Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.